こんにちは。ちょっと絶賛炎上中ですね。もうすごいことになってますよ。もうコメント何十万件と押し寄せてるミスターオリンピアオープンボディビルの順位について IFBB 副会長のタイラー・マニオンが解説してたので、どうやって順位をつけたかね。それを翻訳してみました。こちらでは左から2番目のデレク・ランスフォードが優勝したんですが、右の2人ね、特に絞り込みが良かったハディ・チューパンとアンドリュ・ジャクト、彼らが勝つべきだったのではないかと。しかもですよ、ハディ・チューパンは、中東のファンの怒りもあるんだけど、全然納得してないと。インスタのストーリーにも意味深な写真を投稿してた上に、実際に表彰式でもみんながダブルバイセップスを取ってる中で1番と、私が1番だっていうのをやってました。実際みんなインスタとかでもボディビル出てくると思うんですが、ほとんどのコメントがね、やはりハディ・チューパンが勝つべきだったとか、デレックを批判する内容ばっかりなんですよね。特に2023も燃えてたんだけど、今回もね、すごいことになってるので、どうやってジャッジが判断を下したのか、しっかり見ていきましょう。で、なんとデレック・ランスフォードに新しいニュースが入りまして、彼はミスターオリンピア4週間前になんと胸トレで怪我をしました。その状態でミスターオリンピアに出てきて優勝したという新事実が明らかになったので、種目はインクラインダンベルプレス。軽めの重量を扱う日だったらしいんですが、70キロだったと。それがね、これ大変なことよ。で、数レップ目でパチッという感覚があって、その瞬間に終わったと悟ったと。完全にこれは断裂したわけじゃなくて、中度の損傷だったらしいです。強い痛みと腫れがあって、翌日にはあざが浮き出てきてね、なかなか焦りもあったんじゃないかと思うんですが、胸を休ませながら各部位の維持と減量調整を続けて、ミスターオリンピア出場可能になりました。ただ当日も胸に違和感を残したままステージに上がってたらしいので、すごい驚きのニュースでしたね。その中で勝ったのは。で、問題なのは、やはりね、デレクは決勝で甘かったと。特に周りの選手がギアを上げてきた中で、デレクはぼやけてしまった。それでも予選で3ポイント突き放してたので優勝したんですが、もしミスターオリンピアがね、土曜の夜だけの大会だったらハリが勝っていたと思うんですが、タイラー・マニオンが語っていること、これを見れば、ある程度納得できますね。ただ、ボディービルの審査っていうのは、AI がするわけじゃないので、割とね、ムムっと感じる部分もありました。面白いこれが。なので選手たちの体をね、審査員がどう見てるのか、トップ6、ニック・ウォーカーまで評価と順位の原因を説明してたので、非常に面白いです。単純に勉強にもなるし、かなり僅差の戦いだったと思うので。ということで、本編スタートです。
Pro League Vice President, and this will be your Mr. Olympia Open Men's Bodybuilding Recap. So, obviously, another tightly contested show with these open men. As always, it's very close contest when these top guys come here and are in shape. And overall, I thought that these guys did a good job of bringing in solid condition and good packages to the show. So, first, we'll start off with Derek and Hadi since they were first and second, and I think it was very close between the two. And then we'll move down the placing order. So, we'll go pose by pose. First up is the front double bicep pose. This pose, along with quite a few other poses, I think are pretty close when it comes to deciding who wins the pose. In the front double bicep, for Derek, obviously, he has great taper, a nice small waist. For Derek, his legs were definitely up in size. He definitely kept his leg size for this show. You see nice deep lines in the separation throughout his legs. You see good leg width from the front, and he just held on to more volume in his legs. Obviously, a weakness for Derek in this pose is his inner arms don't really have much detail, and obviously he doesn't really have much of a bicep peak. Now we move over to Hadi. Again, Hadi and Derek are built very similarly. So you see, again, a very nice taper into a nice small waist, the flaring lats. Hadi is very, very conditioned. You go down to the lower body and the legs are very conditioned, but you see that the legs definitely do not have the same size as Derek's. They're separated, they're definitely conditioned, and then you just don't see that same leg width throughout the legs and the quads, and also the same sweep. I would say that Hadi also has a little bit less sweep on the right side than the left. It was pretty evident that it was a little bit imbalanced between those two legs, but overall the leg size just was not the same as Derek's. Bicep wise and inner arm detail, he obviously has much better bicep peaks and more detail in the biceps. So as you can see, it's a very, very close pose. They both have that very nice taper. When it comes to the arms, Hadi has the better arms. When it comes to the legs, Derek has the better legs. Separation through the legs, Derek has a little bit better separation in the legs and obviously a little bit better size. Hadi's conditioning of the muscles themselves are a little bit better. The feathering was there. Throughout the upper body, I would say that Hadi was a little bit more conditioned with a little bit more detail overall as well. But obviously Derek was in shape here and still conditioned 2. For me, because of the overall size, really, I think there's a little bit of a size difference overall. I gave this pose to Derek by a hair to make it 1 pose to 0. Next up is the front lat spread pose. For both these guys, I don't think it's their strongest pose. It's not weak by any means, but I don't think it is their strongest pose. So first with Derek, you can see that actually the size and the detail on his outer arms are much, much better than what his inner arm looks like when they're raised up for the front double. He had good volume and cap to his delts. Chest-wise, his chest lacks, some of that striation and detail. I think it looks thicker in some poses than others. You can see really just a touch of thickness, especially through the lower pecs in this pose, but he definitely could use more thickness and more of that detail and striation throughout the upper pec and whole entire chest as a whole. Again, he has very, very wide lats going down into a nice small waist. He does have detail in the midsection throughout the abs. And then like I stated about his legs before, the legs were solid here. We move over to Hadi. For me, Hadi's chest is actually even flatter than Derek's. What I mean by this is the muscle itself doesn't look as thick. You don't really see the thickness there. His chest is obviously a little bit more separated, but it doesn't have that same separation and striation and detail that you see in his chest in some of these other poses. Going to the outer arms and shoulders, I actually think Derek in this pose, his outer arms have more volume and more mass to them than Hadi's. Derek's shoulders also have more volume and mass to them than Hadi's as well. Hadi's shoulders are a little bit flat. You can see the shape of the shoulders here. It's just not the same as Derek's. But again, he has very wide lats going down into a nice small waist. He definitely has detail throughout the abs and the midsection. And then again, his lower body is conditioned, but the lower body is not the same as Derek's. So because I think the outer arms and shoulders and the chest, how it all flows on Derek compared to Hadi, I think Derek is better there. Plus Derek's advantage in the legs. I gave this pose to Derek to make it 2 poses to 0. Next up is the side chest pose. For Derek here, again, you can see his outer arms and shoulders are actually not bad at all. So for arms being, a weakness for him when they're raised, whenever they're in these side poses, they actually look very, very solid. I mean, just compare it to Hadi's right here. Again, Derek's shoulder, I think, is better than Hadi's shoulder. Derek's outer arms have a little bit more of that volume and roundness. Hadi has a little bit more of that peak to the bicep here. So all things considered, they're very similar. I think width throughout the top from shoulder to shoulder, meaning shoulder throughout the chest to the back shoulder, I think Derek is wider. I also think that actually Derek's chest is thicker than Hadi's. You can see that chest flatness here. And even with the back pec that's pushed over, you can see Derek's is thicker than Hadi's as well. They both keep their midsections tight, go down into the lower body, and you see that Hadi's legs are a little bit smaller than Derek's. They both have very good separation and detail to them, but you just see more of that density and mass to Derek's leg. And obviously they're both in very good condition. So for me, again, because of where Derek beats Hadi in this pose, especially throughout, actually both the upper and the lower body for me, I thought this was a pretty clear pose to Derek to make it 3 poses to 0. Next up is the back double bicep pose. Obviously, we know Derek has a very, very crazy back double bicep. His back itself is, ridiculous. He has very good depth and thickness to it. Very nice width into a nice small waist. I think his legs from the back looked pretty big. He kept really, I think, solid size on his legs this time around. You can see he has obviously the detail and the striation to the glutes and the hamstring, but you see that sweep from the quads that come into play to really accentuate the leg width here in Derek from the back. Shoulders solid from the back, not the most overpowering, but solid. Again, arms here, you see he has solid tricep development, but the bicep peak in development could stand to be better. Now we move over to Hadi. Hadi's back itself compared to Derek, Hadi's back has good width. Doesn't quite match Derek's width, but the real difference here is the density to the back. As conditioned as Hadi is throughout the chest and the midsection from the front, you don't see that same conditioning in the back here, so it just doesn't have that depth and 3D look to it. Go down into the lower body, and again, you don't see that development and leg width or even hardness again to the legs in the lower body that you do in Derek's. So for me, I think this is a very clear pose for Derek. I think he exposes a lot of Hadi's weaknesses here to make it 4 poses to 0. Next up is the back lat spread pose. Now, this is another pose that I think is very, very close. Why? Because again, the lower body difference, I think Derek has the advantage in the lower body here. However, when we move into the upper body, I think that Derek is not opening up every time that he hits this pose. So you can see the density and the thickness that Derek has to his back. Again, his triceps, rear delts, everything actually looks very solid here. But the back itself, he's not opening it up to display the width that obviously he has. Hadi, on the other hand, does a very, very good job of opening up his back all the way, so you see thickness and density in detail throughout his back. Also, his lats look wider than Derek's in this pose, but he has the disadvantage in the lower body. Really, I think this is a very close pose because while Hadi's width is better, you still see that Derek has that thickness and 3D look, and Derek's lower body is overall better. But for me, I think this pose went back and forth a lot. It really all depended on how Derek was opening up the lats, and I ended up giving this pose to Hadi, definitely because of the width and how he opened up his back to make this 4 poses to 1. Next up, we're going to move into the side tricep pose. Again, here from the side, you see kind of a little bit more of the size difference between Derek and Hadi at this show. Really, in this pose, you can see, I think even a little bit more than the side chest, the difference in the size of their legs, the density of their legs. So I think Derek has a lower body advantage here. Now, when it comes to the upper body, again, I think that Derek's chest is a little bit thicker than Hadi's. You can see Hadi's striations, though, a little bit more in this pose in the side chest and his backpack. Going to the outer arms and shoulders, again, I feel like the tricep development, the shoulders, just the outer arm in general is a little bit better on Derek's. Both their midsections are tight. They both have good abs, but Hadi's obviously, that's his one crazy advantage. He has that crazy obliques and ab detail. So for me in this pose, again, because of the lower body advantage and overall size and thickness and roundness, I gave this pose to Derek to make it 5 poses to 1. Next up is the abdominal and thigh pose. For Derek, I think he's definitely improved this over time. You see now nice taper going down into his waist. We see much more ab development in detail than he previously showed. Arms overhead, arms are okay. Obviously, he doesn't have that detail and peak that others have. Go down into the lower body. Again, the legs, they held size and thickness and had good separation to them. However, when you move over to Hadi, this is always one of his strongest poses. This is one of his strengths, is his core and detail to the midsection. He has great taper, chest looks full. He has the biceps that are peaked, development good. Go down to the lower body, and even though his legs are down a little bit, you see the conditioning throughout. Overall, just the flow of the pose and the conditioning that gets brought out, especially through the midsection. I thought this was a clear pose for Hadi to make it 5 poses to 2. Then lastly, we have the most muscular pose. Again, I felt like Derek has improved this pose. He still needs more of that thickness and striation and detail throughout the chest. However, outer arms and shoulders definitely looked better. Legs kept the size, like I said, so everything holds for the lower body from the front that I said before. Even though Derek got better, you still go over to Hadi. Again, this shows off all of his strengths, the detail and conditioning throughout his chest, his midsection. Here, his chest, while it still isn't the thickest chest, it still is thick enough, and it shows the crazy detail and striations throughout the chest. His arms and shoulders tend to look a little bit better in this most muscular pose when he has his fists touching together like this. So the development in the outer arms and shoulders is there. Again, the legs are a little bit downsized, but you see the striations and conditioning throughout the legs. And again, just the overall polish and flow of this pose. It's very hard to take it off Hadi, and I thought it was a clear pose for Hadi to make it 5 poses to 3. Now, obviously, the scores were Derek won pre-judging 6-9. Hadi won finals 7-8. I felt like personally that Derek's conditioning from Friday to Saturday night, as the night moved on, his conditioning lessened on Saturday. So it wasn't quite the same as it was Friday night. And I felt for Hadi, he came back a little bit more conditioned Saturday night compared to Friday night. Obviously, there's a couple of judges that switched their scores, but it wasn't enough for Hadi to take it home. Derek had too big of a lead. But it makes sense, like I said, because there's poses that are very close to each other. The front double bicep pose is close. The back lat spread is close. The front lat spread is close. Even the side tricep is relatively close enough that I can see arguments for Hadi, even though I think it was a Derek pose. So depending on which way the judges were going, you can give either guy basically almost all those poses. That shows you how close it always is with these two. They're built very similar, and when they're both on like this, it is definitely very hard to judge them. But I thought they both did a great job. I think that Derek's lead definitely was enough. I felt like he was for sure the clear winner on Friday. I think Saturday it was much more debatable which one should take it home. So at the end of the day, I feel like this was a solid decision, and Derek was able to barely squeak out another win on one of his main rivals. Next up, we had Andrew Jack in third place. For me, I think this was by far Andrew's best look of his career. I was very impressed with what he brought to the stage. This was definitely the most conditioned Andrew has ever been while still keeping a lot of muscle on his frame. Obviously, he was pretty conditioned once before at the Arnold a couple of years ago, but he just lost too much of his muscle and looked a little bit stringy at that show. This was not the case here. For me, Andrew has some very, very strong poses, but also some weaker poses. That is the difference on what put him behind the top two guys. So for Andrew, I think his front double bicep is great. Obviously, his upper body is great in this pose. For the legs, I felt like this was the best that his legs actually look from the front when it comes to separation and detail to the quads, but also actually, in my opinion, the size and the leg width and what the space it took up on stage. I still think he could use just slightly more leg width and size to those quads, though, from the front to really complete the pose. But front double looked really, really good. His front lat spread, in my opinion, was the best out of the top four. The 3D look and the width and everything that he displays in that front lat spread, the thickness to the chest, the detail, the outer arms and shoulders look great here. And even his legs, they just flow so well, I think, because of how good his upper body looks. So front lat spread, very, very strong. Moving to the side chest, while I think he's hitting the side chest better than he previously did, there still has got to be a way to tinker with this pose to make it look more comfortable for him. And obviously just to make it look more pleasing as well, because his upper body should look very, very dominant in this pose no matter what. Now you get to the lower body. Obviously, this is where you see he needs more of that size to his legs. He needs more of that density, that thickness. He could use more, obviously, of that hamstring drop, but overall just density to these side legs as well. That's going to really make this pose stronger. So there's kind of issues with both the upper and the lower body here. That's what makes this a weaker pose. And he's obviously on the right track. He's continuing to improve it. I'm sure they're going to keep figuring out ways to improve it as well, to turn it into his strength. And I think once the upper or the lower body becomes very, very good, it can counteract whatever the weakness is. So on the right track here, but that's what's holding him back. And while we're on the side, I might as well go into the side tricep. It's the same thing here. I think flexibility, if he got a little bit more flexible, can help with his arm placement, how he's reaching back and everything else. Because he's trying to reach back so far, I think it's making his upper body twist in a direction, again, that makes his upper body, it's not displaying everything in the most pleasing manner. So we're not seeing the detail and, throughout his upper body. The midsection doesn't look as good as it could. And because of this twisting, I think, again, it's hard for him to do the leg placement, and he needs more to his legs here as well. So again, his arms are good. So I think this pose and his midsection is really, really good. His abs are great. So I think if he's able to keep figuring out this pose, it can become a strength for sure. I think maybe flexibility is the key part for him here. Going into the back poses, his back double has definitely improved. He was doing a pretty good job of keeping it open the whole entire time. Sometimes he was pinching a little bit throughout the middle of his back. I still feel like he could just use a little bit more of that thickness and density back there, but overall was definitely impressed with how it came up. I just think, again, you just see it's behind those top two guys here. And again, the lower body. This is the first time that he was conditioned throughout his hamstring and his glutes and kept leg size from the back, but you see he just needs more leg width when comparing to all three of the other guys in the top four. He doesn't have that same leg width and that same leg density that they have. The back lat spread, I thought, was one of his most improved poses. He finally opened his back up all the way. He still displayed thickness and depth and detail to it in this back lat spread pose. I was honestly very, very impressed with how his back looked in this pose. Again, what I said for the back double bicep for the lower body still stands in this pose, but overall, I thought very, very impressive and compared very well against Hadi and Samson in this pose. Then we move to the front. Ab and thigh is always one of Andrew's strongest poses. I feel like it's between him and Hadi for the best abdominal and thigh poses probably right now in the Pro League. So that's always going to be a strength for him. And then favorite most muscular pose, I think he definitely looks the best where he's doing the crab where his hands are over top of each other. They're in close. You see the thickness throughout the chest, the size and the peak of his arms, and the detail with the shoulders. His legs as well look good here. So again, Andrew brought a very impressive package, and I think he is on the right track to really challenging anybody, whether it's the two guys that beat him here, whether it's Samson, whether it's a couple of the other guys that placed a little bit below. I think he is on the right track where if they can bring this kind of polish and conditioning and add a little bit of tissue in the right places, the sky is the limit for this guy, and I'm super excited to see what happens in 2026 with him. Next up in fourth place, we had Samson. For me, basically, it looks like what happened with Samson is he tried to come in more conditioned like we wanted to see from him, him, but his condition, you could tell his skin was definitely thinner than it used to be. But while doing this, the separation and detail that I'm sure a lot of people were thinking were going to be brought out wasn't really brought out. And in doing this, he sacrificed a lot of his size, and especially in his back and in his legs. The back, I guess, would make a little bit more sense because we know that's always his one body part that he needs to continue to work on improving. But his legs have always been a very, very big strength of his. I think it was very surprising to see that he just lost that volume and that density to his legs. You could see it from all angles, whether it was from the front, you just didn't see that same outer sweep and that same leg width across his legs from the front. You saw from the side, his legs didn't look quite as big as well. And then from the back again, when you're missing that sweep, it just takes a little bit away from that width. So I guess really for him, while they're figuring out his body, he finally brought in and tried to bring in that really crisp conditioning look, but it just seems like he had to over diet and lose too much of his muscle. So I really think for him, this can be more of a one-off show. They try to do that, so probably they're going to go back to the formula that had him in those top spots the past 2 years. Maybe there's a way for him to basically get back to that volume that he had when he won the Olympia last year, that conditioning that he had when he won the Olympia. If it's possible for him to just take that maybe a touch further, that would probably be his best overall look, but he definitely cannot sacrifice that fullness and roundness because everybody was probably thinking that he could come in better condition and keep that fullness and roundness, and that was what's going to make him so hard to handle and so deadly. So yeah, really for him, I just think they tried to bring the condition and lost the muscle, and that explains why he ended up in fourth here. He just didn't have enough next to all three of the guys ahead of him in too many of the poses, but nothing I think really to get discouraged about. I think he can rebound very quickly from this, and I think 2026 still looks as bright as ever for him. Next up in fifth, we had Martin Fitzwater. For me, Martin made sure he came in very, very conditioned at this show, which obviously normally is a good look for him, and I still thought was a very solid look for him. But I think, again, he's another guy that while doing this, I think he lost just a touch too much of his size to do this. You could see, for me at least, his legs from the front, you just didn't have that same width and that same size that he normally has. And I think that affected with how he looked from the front a little bit. For Martin too, obviously, one of the main things is he can improve is his back. He can still improve that thickness and depth to his back, and obviously the width as well. I think in the back double and the back lat spread, he can improve the thickness and the width there. That's going to start making him look stronger in those back poses. It's also going to help him from the front as well. I think the front double he looks great in. His taper is great, but when it comes to the front lat spread, you can see he can't quite get those lats out all the way yet in that front lat spread, so that hinders him in that pose. Side poses look solid as usual. Again, the conditioning was there and the detail was there. And then, of course, his ab and thigh and his most muscular are great poses for him. So overall, I think a very solid showing for Martin. It's just, can he bring in conditioning that's like this or basically almost on par with it while still keeping a little bit more volume as well? So a little bit of a similar boat as Samson, except for Martin, when he's in the condition, you see that separation and that he has that kind of gnarly conditioning. It's just, can he add that little bit more volume back so he can hang with the guys that are a little bit bigger than him? Next up in six, we had Nick. I think Nick's condition, this condition wasn't really bad, but he just wasn't really on. And when I say on, like everything was a little bit flat for him. He didn't really have the greatest pop to his physique. I think the main issue for Nick was his waist just appeared very wide, I would say, on stage. He did a better job of keeping his midsection controlled for sure, but the waist just seemed very wide in a lot of the poses, especially when you're looking at him from the front double and the front lat spread. Even the ab and thigh, just he has deep abs and deeply separated abs, but the waist just looked really thick. And even when he was doing his most muscular, which is still a very strong pose, you can see that that waistline just wasn't coming in as much as it has in the past. Even as recently as Pittsburgh, I thought that waistline was definitely tighter. So his back double bicep was great. His back lat spread is great. You can see he definitely improved both these poses again. They're very, very strong poses. His legs look great from the back and have that amount of density and muscle. But when it comes to Nick, he just really has to work on bringing in that midsection and having the right pop to his physique. And again, because the midsection got wider, I don't know if the legs, especially from the front, the quads actually went down, or I think it's just the illusion of the waist being a little bit wider. So that's what happened there with Nick. Overall, though, I think these guys did a great job of competing and bringing the best that they possibly could to the stage, and they made it a very exciting Mr. Olympia.
ということで、私の感想ですね。ほとんどのポーズで、優勝者と2位については文句全くないですね。タイラー・マニオンも素晴らしい説明をしてたと思うし、かなりボディービルをね、見る目がしっかりと備わった人物だなと思いますよ。もう私なんかよりはるかにあるんだろうけど、唯一、ポーズでハディが勝ってたと思うのはフロントダブルバイですね。近年のハディは右足の方が 左足よりダウンサイズしているという状態になってるんだけど、実際このポーズでそこまでね、顕著には見えてないです。もちろん斜めから見ると違うんですが、このポーズにおいてのポーズ名がね、フロントダブルバイセプス。バイセプスは上腕二頭筋なので、結構二頭筋のセパレーション発達に重きを置いていいんじゃないかなと思うので、ハディ中盤で。で、それ以外のポーズでね、タイラーの説明にもあった通り、ボディービルダーとしてのサイズの違い、ここの差がもう2023年とかよりもかなり大きく開いてます。肩だったり胸、もちろん上腕もそうなんですが、サイドポーズではもう場を支配できるほどのパンパンマンなのでね、デレックは。デレックのサイド、スコルチコです。で、バックポーズでも、背中うんぬんでハディが勝ってたポーズもあるんですが、下半身に目を向けると、また大きなサイズの違いが見れる。デレックはここを強化したことがかなりのアドバンテージになってるよね。ということでして、コンディショニングの差、質感の硬さにおいて、ハディ中盤がぶっちぎってた部分、そしてポーズも何個かあったものの、オープンボディビルダーとしてのデレックの優秀さ、バックだけではない、もうサイドでもぶっちぎれる選手になったという事実が、今回デレックを勝たせたと思います。皆さんどう思いますかね？ハディが勝つべきだったか、それともアンドリューが勝つべきだったか。実際にこうやってね、審査した人がしっかりと説明してくれる。いろんな意見があると思うけど、この点においても称賛に値するんじゃないでしょうか。世界各地に飛んで誰よりも近くで選手をね、審査してる人たちなので、これは理解ができます。デレックの勝利にもね。ただ、写真や映像で見るハディ中盤のキレ、体のシャープさはとんでもないので、ハディが勝つべきだったっていう方のね、意見も十分に理解できます。皆さんはどうでしょうか？どっちが勝っていると思いますか？ハディは中東の選手だから負けたとか、英語が喋れないから、ボディビルというね、ビジネスを大きく宣伝できないだろう。インスタグラムの活動もそこまで活発じゃないだろう。だから負けたんか。そんな意見も見られますが、しっかりと今日のようなことを見ると、優勝には納得ができます、デレックの。ただ楽しみなのは、アンドリューとサムソンだよね、これから。絶対に彼ら改善してくるので、ニック・ウォーカーやら、マーティンやら、首ゴジラも含めて、今後また予想できない展開になりそうです。非常に楽しみ。ということで、ありがとうございました。ではまた。